Greetings to everyone. May the Lord bless you. I'm hoping that you guys can hear me. I am going to be looking on my screen, and I can see that you can hear me. So, if you can't hear me, let me know. Give me a yes, thumbs up. But I have a very special guest here with us tonight, and something I've been looking forward to for a long time. The Lord brought our paths together divinely. Believe me, one day we'll have to tell that story, Dr. Hinnant.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
tonight we're going to be looking at a study on end times prophecy. And it's a lot of different things that you get from watching YouTubes, a lot of different versions about what people believe. And what we want to do is have Dr. Hinnant to clear some things up over this next several weeks. We're gonna be talking about various things that's germane to uh, the end times eschatology,
Yes.
eschatological points of view. Now,
Yes.
some views vary, and one of the things that I have got from my Dr. Hinnant is one thing we want to make sure is that you may disagree, but you won't be able to refute what we are saying in the word because the word is what we go by. So we want to have him say some things, but first I want to read up a bio on him. Now, Dr. Greg Hinnant is a Bible expositor, teacher, and writer. He has published 18 books in the genres of Christian living, biblical commentary, devotional work, and you guessed, end time prophecy. And I wanted him to just share a little bit about himself and specifically some of the things we're going to be covering over the next several weeks, dealing with four specific books that he's written dealing with end times.
Yes, Joe. Thank you very much for having me on your program. And I'm really glad to have this chance to share these truths about end time prophecy because it is so relevant. It's only going to get more important every day that passes. This subject is going to get more important, and it's more vital that Christians understand it and react to it the proper way, and that is to be prepared for it. But I've been in ministry for about 40 years, been a teacher and a Bible expositor. For about 26 years, almost of that time, I've been a professor with a Bible school and prepared a number of courses. And about 10 years ago, and by the way, my courses have to do with other subjects having to do with practical theology, biblical studies, for instance, understanding and overcoming adversity, discipleship, wisdom, biblical wisdom, a study of biblical study of marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and also as well textual studies, biblical studies on the book of Colossians, book of Philippians, book of Daniel. And then about 10 years ago, the Lord He distinctly led me into a much deeper study of eschatology. Mm-hmm. And over these last 10 years, it's led to four books, three of them rather large volumes, and three syllabus study guides, because I teach them with our school, but also I teach them independently. It's my intellectual property. I will be preparing a fourth probably in the next year or so. And so this has been a very lengthy work, but by doing this, it's given me a tremendous amount of time to soak in this subject. I've learned that many people believe what they believe primarily because they've heard it from a trusted teacher or pastor or perhaps professor. That's fine. That's good. But when you ask them why they believe a certain position, what text can convince them of that, often they're unable to do that. And again, it's fine for us to trust pastors and teachers that we've had a long experience with. One thing we need to remember in that regard is that because the teachers write on many different points of doctrine and biblical interpretation does not mean they may be right in this area. I think it's fair to say that most Bible teachers of our times, unless they are dedicated prophetic teachers and scholars, and we have some of those around, unless they are dedicated to this work, they may be they may be coming into this field with one hand tied behind their back, meaning they haven't had a lot of in-depth studies of this. So that's a possibility. But I've learned in these studies in these past years that understanding the Old Testament prophecies, what the prophets of Israel had to say about the end times, is very important, because nothing that you find in Old and New Testament prophecies regarding the end times is contradictory. Some appear to be, but what they are actually is small pieces of a very large puzzle in which God paints the end time scenario. So the prophets of the Old Testament, none of them saw the complete end times scenario. They all received small little pieces of that puzzle. We could call them vignettes, little episodes. In other words, their prophecies were episodic. And I can say with confidence that none of them at the time they prophesied knew the whole picture. They didn't have to. They weren't supposed to be. God didn't intend them to. They understood what they had heard or seen, and they faithfully passed that on. And the joint testimony of the Old Testament prophets clearly paints a picture of Israel being restored in the last days, and God finally having his purpose among them to be God's evangelistic agency to the world. That will happen specifically in the first half of the tribulation period. Everything that they said perfectly dovetails, if they can see my hand here, dovetails with the New Testament prophets. And I'm speaking of Christ, who is the prime prophet, and then Paul, who was the prime source of the mysteries of the church and of the rapture and of the resurrection of the dead. And then also Peter and John. And we can extend that to James and even Jude. When they spoke of the end times, everything they said merged with, fit perfectly with the revelation of the Old Testament prophets. None of it contradicted. So in these last 10 years, I've had time to go deep into the Old Testament prophecies that produced the book that you have there called the Day of the Lord Commentary. And
right here.
yes, that one, right. And by the way, your viewers can know that if they are Logos Bible software users, these 4 books, what I call the Hinnant End Times Prophecy Collection, these 4 books that Dr. Fierce will show you tonight are in the Logos Bible software online bookstore. So if you're a Logos user, you can buy them there they don't cost much at all. You can buy them and add them to your Logos library.
And Dr. Hinnant, are they also in ebooks as well on Amazon?
Yes. First of all, the books that are through Logos are all ebooks because it is part of a digital library of there. And Logos is a tremendous. If you don't have Logos bookstore, if you don't have a Bible software program, I would highly recommend Logos software. It's awesome. But yes, these books are available worldwide. All 18 of my books are available worldwide in print and in ebook through Amazon and through many other sources, as well as our own website, which is greghennantministries.org. So there is the Old Testament commentary book, and it is a resource book, so it's going to go into the various passages in the Old Testament that do one of these things: prophesy of the end times, or it is a foreshadowing of the end times, or some type which tells you something about the end times. For instance, Joseph, the experience of Joseph directly parallels the experience of Joseph and his brothers, directly parallels the experience of Christ and his brethren, the Jewish people. So I point that out. And so, so this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years with a concentration. I maintain other studies and teach other subjects and produce devotionals and Christian living pieces. I did a book last year on Freemasonry, an expose on that. So, but my primary work has been in eschatology for 10 years.
Okay. Okay, so now tonight we want to start, and you got a book on the second coming that I got here.
Yes, the second coming of Christ, his appearing, his return, and our preparation. This is sort of the flagship book of my eschatological works. Just to let your viewers know what's in there, it's divided into three parts. The first part gives you all the prophecies, Old Testament and New, regarding the two-part um, second coming. And by that I mean he appears, Jesus will appear to terminate the church age and to release what will then soon become the tribulation period. It doesn't begin immediately. And then 7 years later, he will return to earth. So it talks about both of those events. I give you the scriptures for them, Old and New Testament. Then in the second part of the book, I give 6 chapters that are dedicated to spiritual readiness. One thing I want to emphasize above everything else to your listeners is while prophetic knowledge is very important, because as sons of Issachar, we need to know that these things which are written by the prophets thousands of years ago are now coming to a climax in our generation. It's most important that we understand it. But the prophecies alone, that is prophetic knowledge, is not preparation for the coming of Christ and our qualifying to be extracted in the great event we call the rapture, but rather spiritual readiness is what is essential for that. To put it in simple terms, when Jesus appears, he will catch away those who are walking closely with him and who have passed their test successfully, in that they've submissively trusted him and obeyed him through the tests the Holy Spirit arranged in their lives. They will be taken out, even if they know very little about end times prophecy. Now, on the other hand, my philosophy here is that revelation is for preparation. That is, the revelation God has given in all the prophecies of the end times. The purpose of that is for spiritual preparation. So we must not miss that. That keep that most uppermost in your mind as we talk about this subject over the next couple of weeks. Spiritual readiness is important. We find, sadly, and I would almost say tragically, that some Christians have a curiosity about the details of end times prophecy. And it is a very intriguing subject, and it's a very detailed subject. So I can understand how we can have a curiosity, but that curiosity must be converted into a deep heart desire to know Jesus closer and walk with him closer, know him more intimately.
Intimacy.
Yes, that's because that's why we've been saved and filled with the Spirit, is to come to know God and to walk close to it. And then when the rapture happens, we've already been training in eternal life, in life eternal, and then we just simply step over into eternity. We pass from time into eternity in the event of the rapture.
Right. And I know you wrote one on the Rapture, the Tribulation story.
Yes,
You got
yes.
that book.
Yeah. The Tribulation story is a very unique book, Joe. I don't think you'll find anything quite like that out there. And what I'm doing very simply to help your readers understand the purpose of that book is taking Revelation 6 through 19 and putting the events which are in those chapters in probable chronological order. I'm not going to be, in my teaching or writing, too dogmatic about things which God is not very clear on. So, for instance, what nation the Antichrist comes from, that's not revealed. Who he is, that's not revealed. His character and his works, that is revealed. His attitude toward Israel and his work, that is revealed. So on the revealed things, I will say this will happen. It shall happen. On the other things, I'll say maybe, possibly, it could be this. Now, in that book, the things known, certainly, are like pieces of a puzzle with other pieces missing. So I will try to connect those dots, if you will, or pieces, with a very probable explanation. And these are, of course, the things that I prayed about quite a bit. So I'm giving you in that book the likely story, how it will unfold. It is a narrative. It is the last epic battle between the forces of darkness and light, between God and Satan, each being fronted, if you will, by their special representatives. In the first half of the tribulation, you have the 144,000 Jews representing God and working for salvation in the world. Meanwhile, you have Antichrist rising with a supernatural claim that he is the Christ, the Jewish Messiah, because he's been resurrected from the dead. It's an undeniable work. Paul calls it a satanic miracle, false miracle. But that is going on in the first half of the tribulation period. Then in the second, Antichrist assumes world power at the midpoint and rules the world for 42 months. So he and his religious right-hand man, the false prophet, will be working miracles to demonstrate to the world that they are God, that the beast is God. At the same time, the two witnesses of Revelation 11 will be God's representatives, calling down judgments on Antichrist and on his worshipers for the final 3.5 years. Then the epic battle comes to a terrific, cataclysmic conclusion at the Armageddon. Conclusion. Armageddon is actually a war that begins at the midpoint, goes 3.5 years, and then the final battle of Armageddon ends that time and inaugurates the kingdom of Christ.
Okay, so that's 3 good books. So now I want to this final book, and then we're going to get into some questions because I'm sure people want to know some details. You've given us small clips and nibbits, and but and this final book is Revelation. I can't show it all because it's blurred, but
Revelation notes.
You covered the book. It's Revelation notes, and you pretty much cover Revelation in detail. Verse per verse. And that's beautiful because a lot of times when I look at books and commentaries, they skip certain things and they leave you saying, well, the reason I wanted to know is I got the other part of it, but I just didn't understand this part. So a lot of people, they'll skip over, but you have done an outstanding job in this book. In fact, you say you've added more to it. You've got a new edition.
In fact, just to let your viewers know, the Second Coming book and the Day of the Lord commentary are both in their second edition. And I did that this past year to update the statistics in those books. The Revelation notes, which is very full, I will be working on over the next month or two to, in fact, probably within a month, to have that completely updated as well. It will not change any significant fact in the book at all. And everything that is in the book now will continue to be in it. No positions have been changed. So the book is very complete now. But to let your readers know what that book is about, it is a verse-by-verse commentary on the book of Revelation. There are 22 chapters in the book, just as there are 22 chapters in Revelation. In each chapter, I introduce the chapter, give you an overview of that chapter in the book of Revelation. Then I give you a verse-by-verse breakdown, along with pastoral applications, that is, applications of the spiritual principles in that verse to our lives. And that's why I call it an inspirational commentary on the book of Revelation. Don't let that title mislead you, because it is extremely informational as well. And I go into, obviously, I'm interpreting the scriptures using the grammatical, historical, hermeneutic, and I'm giving details where those are necessary to understand any point. And then each chapter also has at its end what I call additional gleanings. That is, they are messages that I took from that chapter, Christian living pieces, devotional pieces, and I put them at the end of each chapter. So that's what's in that. Now let me add one more. Let me add one more thing, Joe, if I can, about the second coming book. I mentioned that the first part of the Second Coming book is prophecy. The second part talks about spiritual preparation. And there I use the words Jesus himself used in the Olivet Discourse when he was prophesying of his return. Those are simply this: be ready, be watching, be wise, be worthy. And that means to live a prayerful life and a cross-bearing life. And I explained that in the book. And then also to be faithful. So important that we be faithful in our calling, and then also be knowing him evermore. Those are the points, those 6 points that he mentioned. And so I elucidate in those 6 chapters, and they're fairly lengthy because that is so important. Then in the third part of the book, your people need to know this, is that that's given to polemics. Now, that is, I'm arguing and making the case for the pre-tribulational rapture. Why that is the case, I give a lot of biblical evidence there. Then I'm making the case for the partial or select rapture. And that simply is that not all professing Christians will be taken in the rapture. I explain why. Jesus himself, his own prophecy of the parable of the 10 bridesmaids is a prime passage, but there are many others, and I'm put those in that chapter. And then the last chapter in the book is a concise comparison of all the major end time views. And I'm giving you those views, what they are, and how they differ, and why I believe one view is correct and the other or others are not correct. They may be partially correct, but not entirely correct. And so I'm giving you specific scriptures for each point, and I think any Christian would find that very enlightening, particularly ministers.
Right. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty, because
Okay.
you've already said something. I'm sure a lot of people are like, wait a minute. But before we get to that, I want to ask, because this is a very controversial topic.
It is.
You have the pre-trib, the mid-trib, and the post-trib.
Yes, and you also have what's called the pre-wrath, and you
The
have
pre-wrath, right? Right.
dominionism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you have post-millennialism, and you have amillennial views. So you have all these views out there. Yeah.
Right. And the three most popular has to deal with that people say we're going in the beginning, we're going in the middle, or we're going at the end.
Right.
But there are many other views, and
Yes.
it breaks your heart, because I think people don't understand the Bible like they need to. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you to do is just to explain the difference between the second coming and the rapture.
Okay.
Because people don't understand that. Because I know people, they go to Matthew 24 and they read it and they just put everything together and it throws them off.
Right.
And so could you give us some understanding, give the audience a better understanding, okay, why is there a rapture? And what's the difference between, is he coming one time or is he coming twice?
Yeah.
People have that question. That's a legitimate,
Yeah.
a real question. People don't understand.
That's a great question, Joe, and it's really probably the first one we should address. And when I will let your people know, first of all, that there is no text in Old Testament or New Testament which shows both the event of his return to earth, which will be at the Mount of Olives, as the angel stated in Acts chapter 1. This same Jesus who is taken from you will so come again in like manner as you have seen him go. And then also Zechariah 14 shows us that Christ returns to Mount of Olives. His feet will touch there, and then there will be an earthquake which splits that mountain and creates a valley. So we know he comes back to the Mount of Olives. The scriptures that address that never, and I will repeat this, never in the same context describe the catching up of the saints. The two passages are very different. First of all, the passages on the catching away of the saints are joyful, they are comforting, they are reassuring to the Christian. Those that discuss his second coming are dark. They're full of wrath, they're full of judgment, and the language is explicit that it is a catastrophic judgment event, a terminal judgment event. And so they're totally different in nature. And in those passages, you will find only one or the other is mentioned, but never both. Now, let me just throw this out there for you people to help them understand. First Thessalonians was written by Paul to the church at Thessalonica. Second Thessalonians followed. The first epistle explains his appearing, the rapture event. And let me add further that the rapture was not revealed when Jesus gave his Olivet discourse. Now think about that. It was not. So he did not address it in his Olivet discourse. It was one of the matters that he knew would be given later to Paul. That's why he said of the Holy Spirit, when he shall come, he will show you things to come. And I have many things to say unto you, but you cannot receive them now. So Jesus responded to his disciples in Matthew 24 and answered their question as to when Jerusalem would be destroyed. We know that happened in AD 70. And when he would return and close the age. So he addressed his return to earth. And he
So
didn't
he's so he's not addressing the rapture at all in Matthew 24.
not in his
Luke.
not in and let me explain this, not in the prophetic portion of that, because with verse 31, his prophecies about his return to earth to end the age cease. Then from verses 32 forward, all the way through 25:13, he's giving a series of spiritual readiness warnings. Now, in those situations, yes, those scenarios he speaks of do speak to the rapture. But he didn't use that term of the catching up explicitly because that was not revealed. That was a mystery. And for your listeners, a mystery in the Bible is not something we can't understand. It just means something that was a previously undisclosed divine secret. So that was given to Paul, just as was given the mystery of the Gentile church. So that's what, and we'll talk about Matthew 24 a little later. But let's go back to this about the two events. For instance, the primary passages that address the rapture are 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 15 through 18. And the next most frequently used one would be 1 Corinthians 15, 49 through 52. And those tell us about the event itself, that it will be at the same time the resurrection of the dead in Christ, the catching up of the living in Christ. And also, 1 Corinthians 15 says that at that event, we are changed from a mortal to an immortal state, which makes sense. We can't enter the eternal world in our mortal bodies. So those are the primary passages that speak of that. There are other passages. Colossians 3 speaks of that, 1 through 4. Philippians 3, verses 20 and 21 speak of that, and several other passages. In fact, 1 Thessalonians, every chapter ends with a view to the catching up of the church. 1 Thessalonians 1, 2, and 3, and 5 all speak at the end of the chapter of the catching up of the church in some aspect, just as chapter 4 does. So the first Thessalonian epistle is all about his appearing, the rapture. The second letter that he wrote was, first of all, to reassure them someone had come along teaching some incorrect views about Christ's coming, saying that the day of the Lord had already occurred, so they thought they'd missed the rapture. So he wrote that letter to let them know that even if someone wrote a false letter, signed his name fraudulently, that was not correct, that the day of the Lord had not occurred, and it wouldn't occur until the great apostasy happened first, and then the man of sin appeared. So that was then he described the second coming of Christ, and in the opening verses of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 6 through 10, for your readers, they can go to that now or after we get through tonight and see how very different in tone and those verses are, because they describe Christ coming in fiery wrath to execute vengeance and judgment on those who reject the gospel, and he's with his angels, his mighty angels, and there's nothing there about the catching up of the saints. Now, also, Revelation 19, 11 through 21 is John's passage describing Jesus coming in glory and power back to earth to judge Antichrist and the armies of the beast that are gathered with him. It's a very clear passage. Nothing in that passage mentions the calling away of the saints. The reference to the call to the fowls of the air is the same thing that's recorded in Ezekiel 39, verses 17 through 20, where after Armageddon, the birds are called and the animals, Ezekiel says animals also, to help clean up the massive amount of carnage that's a result of the Battle of Armageddon, which occurs in three theaters, primarily Armageddon, meaning the hill of Megiddo, looking over the Jezreel Valley, which is about 30 miles long and 6 miles wide at its largest points. So that will be filled with dead bodies, as well as the area around Jerusalem and the area in what is known as Basra, which is in more modern-day Jordan. So those are your primary passages. Now, also Ezekiel, the Old Testament prophets speak of Armageddon, a number of them. For instance, Joel 3, multitudes in the valley of decision. That's a picture of Armageddon. Zechariah, chapters 12 to 14 speak of Armageddon, particularly chapter 14.